All right, everybody, we are back for the second part of this section, and today we're going to talk about policing ethics. And policing ethics is kind of a difficult situation because there are a lot of police out there that are doing a good ethical job, but as a normal citizen interacting with them, we usually don't remember interacting with them that well, and we don't see them on the news and everything. But when an unethical officer does something, absolutely we remember it. Many times it's on the news and lasts there for weeks or months. So it is definitely an issue in every country, on every police force. There's always ethical issues, some of them very small, some of them very, very major. So the four kind of principles that police should abide by, these ethical principles to create kind of an ethical law enforcement, both individual and organization. The first is legality. We want officers to follow the law. We want officers to stay within the law. We want them to focus on their jurisdiction. We want them to do what we've legally entitled them to do, and not kind of stray outside of those bounds that society has given them as a job. Then there's proportionality. In other words, we want them to focus proportionally and put forth their effort proportionally based on community values and legality and harm. In other words, we don't want them to send all their patrol and resources against marijuana when there's a big problem with sexual assaults in the neighborhood, right? We want them to proportionally focus on the issues that are bringing harm to the community. Then there's necessity, which is similar to proportionality, but has to do with force, right? If we have an arrest warrant for somebody, we don't want them to use a sledgehammer on the door and send SWAT officers through the windows and use flashbangs and tear gas for a parking ticket. Is the amount of force you're going to use, and this can be everything from grabbing someone to pepper spray or a taser to using their service weapon, is that amount of force really necessary? And then finally, there's accountability. If police officers do something wrong, are they facing accountability for it? Is it going to be recognized as a problem? Is it going to be fixed? And if necessary, is either the individual or the organization going to be punished for it? Now, way back in 1985, a researcher named Punch came up with 4 different kinds of corruption. Okay? And unfortunately, police corruption is happening essentially everywhere. And again, this could be very small corruption in a very rare circumstances, or it can be constant all the time. But it is happening in every country. And how we deal with it is going to be a very big issue, as it always has been. It's tough to see this ever completely going away. But the 4 different kinds of corruption, there's straightforward corruption, which is where police either do something or often not do something in exchange for some, cash or some contraband or service or whatever. In exchange for something, I won't arrest you if you give me $100. I won't give you a ticket if you give me a bribe. I won't, that's straightforward corruption. Then there's strategic corruption, where police kind of create a criminal situation and then extort something out of, say, a business owner, right? Where, hey, if you don't give me free food, there's going to be some bad people that are going to come and try to eat at your restaurant or whatever. Combative corruption is where police lie and fake evidence and use violence to try to strengthen their case, right? We've got a guy that we just know is guilty, so we're going to plant evidence on him in order to make sure he goes away for life or for whatever. And then, of course, there's the perversion of justice, which is probably the worst of it, which is where they use kind of violence for revenge or to keep from getting caught from having committed one of the other kinds of corruption or something like that. Now, how do we prevent corruption? Well, again, there's no 100% way. There's going to be corruption in every country, probably until we get to a point as a species where we no longer need police. But as long as we need police, there will be some level of police corruption. Again, all we can do is try to make it as rare as possible. Some of the best ways we've found to do that are, number one, recruitment and human resources. We've got to make sure that we're only hiring people that have a very small chance of becoming corrupt. And if people are found to be corrupt, we need to make sure they're excluded from the organization very quickly. But we need to kind of make sure our personnel are the right kind of person who can become a police officer and maintain a job as a police officer without a high propensity for corruption. And there's integrity testing, i.e., we're going to send somebody undercover to try to offer a police officer a bribe and see if they take it or not. So it's kind of controlled bribery stings, right? Controlled corruption stings. We need to have that kind of maintained program of making sure that police are not doing what we all hope they don't do. And then, of course, there's the code of silence. The police kind of see themselves as one group, and thus, if one of their group is facing scrutiny, they're going to side with a member of their group, no matter how right or wrong they are. This has, obviously not in every department, not in every situation, but this has been an issue for many, many, many years. Police will refuse to give evidence against other police even when they know that other officer has done something wrong, because loyalty to their fellow police officers is more important to them than giving evidence to a district attorney or an investigator or some other thing. So we need to kind of make sure that kind of ceases to be as big of an issue within police organizations. Now, other ways we can control corruption. We can divide them into internal measures and external measures. Internal measures are things that the police do themselves. These are things like integrity testing, which hopefully every large department has. Internal affairs divisions within police agencies. Things like that. External measures are measures that originate from and are staffed by and performed by people outside of the police agency. Now, these external measures or external controls, these are very, very important. Excuse me. And if you're going to have one, they can be citizen review boards. They can be some kind of government control agency that's outside of the police chain of command. There's lots of different kind of ways to do it. But if they're going to be successful, they must be politically independent. Because if the mayor or the governor or the president or the prime minister or the police chief or whoever is able to control what they do and how they do it, politics entering into the situation is going to make their job much more difficult. If they are politically independent, they can kind of seek out information and the truth without pressure to come to a certain conclusion, or pressure to overlook something just this one time, or pressure to be harsher, in the other direction. And then they must have resources. It costs money to really figure out and focus on what police are doing right, what police are doing wrong, hiring undercover people to do integrity testing, having everything from recording equipment for doing suspect interviews to, computers and to email back and forth with interested parties. And resources not only in money, but in time and people and access to information and all those other kind of aspects that they need to do their job. And these external control groups can be grouped into two things. There's watchdogs and there's guard dogs. Okay? And guard dogs have a lot more power, but at the same time, that means it costs more money. It's more politically, it takes more political capital to both create the group and then follow through with the group's recommendations if they do find something. So they're difficult for politicians to create and support. Watchdogs have less power, but at the same time, they're often very good at their job, and they can point out issues without the power to necessarily go in and stop or punish those people. But a lot of times pointing it out is really the important thing anyway, and saying this police agency has this corruption problem, this officer did this thing. Usually just bringing it to the attention of the public is enough to then get something done about it, even if the group doesn't have the power to do something about it themselves. And these are a lot of times a lot more politically viable for both creation and maintenance and following their recommendations. They cost a lot less. So they can both be successful, whether you're doing the less power but more easy to engage with, or more power but more difficult to implement and engage with. All right, that's all on policing. That's the end of the section. Hope you had fun.